This comes from the composer. Do you think Eric Bischoff deserves a spot in the WWE Hall of Fame? And if so, do you believe he'll one day be inducted? And if he is one day inducted, do you think that opens the gates for people like Vince Russo to one day have a shot at being inducted? I do think Eric Bischoff deserves to be inducted. They've put other people, Vern Gagne's in there. I'm sure Vince himself will one day be inducted, even if he waits until after he's dead. Eric Bischoff, say what you want to, but he had a lasting impact on wrestling. There was a war in the late 90s because of Eric Bischoff. If Eric Bischoff does not go to Ted Turner and say, well, you want to know how we can compete with Vince? Well, here's how. And then getting the TV time for Nitro. If there was no Nitro, there's no Monday Night War. If there's no Monday Night War, I don't know where we are today in terms of pro wrestling in the U.S. Maybe we have a bunch of independents. I don't know. Because business was not exactly booming back then in 1995. He helped change the game. You know, competition's a great thing. Why do you think Raw most weeks sucks? There's no competition. They're not fighting for it. They're not up against anybody. It's just we have 3 hours of TV we got to fill, and we've already rewritten the show 15 times, so let's go for number 16. And that's why things are the way they are today. And I shouldn't say, Raw doesn't suck every week, but there's far more things on that show that make you just scratch your head and make you ask why, or frustrate you and make you angry, than there are things that make you go, hey, that was awesome. And it shouldn't be that way. And you got to give Eric Bischoff credit for that. So he absolutely deserves to be inducted. I think one day he will be inducted. And as far as the Vince Russo question, the idea of putting Vince Russo into any wrestling Hall of Fame is laughable to me. But could I see him going into the WWE Hall of Fame one day? You know what? Never say never. It might be less likely once Vince is gone and let's say Triple H is the one making those decisions, because I get the impression, I don't know this, but I get the impression that Triple H may not be a huge Vince Russo fan. Yeah, but he still had an impact. He did, when he had Vince McMahon as the guy filtering out all of his crappy ideas from the really good ones. And he did have some really good ideas. I wouldn't be surprised to find out that some of the segments I love the most about the Attitude Era that were the most fun may well have been a Vince Russo idea. I don't know that. I don't know if the Zamboni angle back in September of 98 was his idea or not, but I love that segment. I'm not saying that Vince Russo never had a good idea in his life. But what I'm saying is, I think he was far more detrimental to wrestling than he was good for wrestling. But could he be in the Hall of Fame one day? Yeah, I could see that. I could see them putting him in the Hall of Fame. If they start putting in people other than just wrestlers and managers and people like that, I think there's a lot of other deserving people who deserve to be put in long before Vince Russo ever is. And we're talking referees, we're talking people who work behind the scenes, maybe even some production people. It's names that they'll never acknowledge like that because they're not big names. They can't put a video package together for a lot of those people. But I think Ultimate Warrior had a point when he made that comment at the Hall of Fame this year by saying there should be the Jimmy Miranda Award. And Jimmy Miranda was a guy who was very instrumental for a number of years in terms of merchandise behind the scenes in WWE and, guys going to him and getting their T-shirts sold. He was a very important part of that machine. And Warrior was always big about that, making money and selling merchandise and all that kind of stuff. And I thought it was really cool for him to go out and say that and almost like put WWE on the spot. Like, I lay down the gauntlet. Now, if you don't do this, it's going to make you look bad. I think, especially with him dying, it would be a nice little thing in Warrior's honor to actually take him up on that. And starting next year, even if it's one of those things where it's not, you don't make a big deal about it necessarily during the ceremony, but you air a little video package with some clips of the guy and who he was and people explaining how important a role he did play behind the scenes. They'll do that sometimes with like big awards like the Oscars or the Emmys, where they'll honor certain people that you would never know in a million years. And they're kind of the people that put the nuts and bolts together for some of these things, but they at least acknowledge them, even if it's in a smaller category. I think they should start doing that. I think they should call it the Jimmy Miranda Award. I think Warrior was right on with that. But until they start honoring people like that, I don't see a Vince Russo going into the Hall of Fame, and I wouldn't exactly be quick to put him in there either.